Hey everyone, today I thought it would be fun to rank all the killers from least to most balanced. Killer balance is pretty subjective, but I'm gonna give it my best shot. We have 5 tiers. How is this fair? Not balanced really. Pretty balanced I guess. Balanced as all things should be. And extremely balanced. Let's get into it. Starting out, we have the How Is This Fair tier. The least balanced killer in the game is Nurse. I'm sure that's to the surprise of no one. Nurse breaks the game by denying most forms of looping with her blink ability, and she's the reason why many perks must be balanced the way they are. She's extremely broken. Hag I'm gonna put next tier, as I really don't think she's that fair, and a bit like Nurse, her power has never really been truly addressed. It's commonly accepted that Nurse is just kind of built different, but Hag is so underplayed I think, that she kind of gets away with it. She's really unfair though. The way she can trap and hold an area with relative ease, and make it really tough to progress the game, is really broken. Blight is next. There is so much that makes Blight unfair. His power, his add-ons, the way so much of his gameplay feels broken with all his techs and stuff. There are so many times a Blight will do something, and I'll just be on the ground thinking, ugh, what? I think he isn't balanced. Might be a bit of a hot take. Moving on to the not balanced really tier. Cenobite is a killer that I think isn't balanced, purely for how strong he can be. It's meant to be evened out by the difficulty of his kit, but I would say even with him partly mastered, you can cause quite a bit of chaos with him, particularly with strong add-ons. Once you get the chain hunt loop going, he's very hard to counter. Knight I'm putting here for now I think, as his power just feels very inconsistent with his ghost gang and their movement or pathing. Feeling really hit and miss. I'm sure stuff like this can be ironed out, but at the moment I think he's quite weak, and relatively far from balance. But he has a lot of potential, and there are many moments when he can do some crazy things. Sadako is next up here, and purely for how weak she feels at the moment, I don't think she's very balanced. She has a lack of things available in her kit to pressure survivors, her condemned is super weak, and her stealth can feel pretty hit and miss. It feels like a lot of work with her, for not that much of a reward. And I think survivors are heavily favoured when facing her. Trapper isn't balanced, he's still far too weak, and he probably always will be to be honest. His power is outdated, put simply. He's an old, tired man, and he requires a lot of time to be learnt. Hillbilly is another old, tired man. His power just doesn't really fit the game anymore, with different maps and his glitches and stuff ironed out. He's just a very moderate killer now. I think overall he isn't balanced, and he does need a decent buff. Twins I find are this weird case of being overpowered and underpowered at the same time, if that makes any sense. I think overall they belong here in not balanced, partly down to how clunky they still feel. They can be very strong and hold a lot of pressure in one moment, and then in another, you're painfully pushing through 3 cooldown animations as you see the survivors kick you in the face. Bubba is closer to Twins in lack of balance I think, in that he's both overpowered and underpowered, depending on the context. If he camps basement, he's maybe one of the strongest killers in the game. If he plays normally, he's pretty awful. His kit just isn't enough a lot of the time, and his collision and chainsaw has far too many downsides to be effective. Spirit I'm gonna put at the top end here. She's still not balanced I think, despite her changes, and despite the fact that I don't think she's that strong. Her power is still kind of guesswork when countering it, and many interactions when facing her feel like a bit of a coin flip. Her reliance on audio for both sides is also a big downside I think, when it comes to judging her balance. Onto the pretty balanced I guess tier. This is honestly where I do think a lot of the killers belong, as I think most of the killers in the game are actually pretty fair. There would be a lot more complaints I think if they were unfair. Freddy is super weak at the moment, but he's still pretty balanced. I think he's super boring and can be weak, but he still has a decent amount going for him. The dream world is still a great asset, and his teleport is still one of the better kinds of map traversal in the game. His primary abilities are what makes him not so balanced. They are so weak. Pig is memed on for being very underpowered, but I don't think she's that bad. She gets a lot of free pressure like Freddy from her traps. Her stealth and ambush are perfectly okay. As a whole, she can be played quite effectively, and I think it's only as you move up in skill, her flaws become more clear. Clown is kind of similar here too. Clown, on the other hand, has a strong main power, I think, with his bottles, that make chases quite hard for survivors, and looping pretty difficult. But that's all he has, which isn't really balanced. He's got strong one-on-one chase, but almost every other area he is quite weak, or just straight up lacking in ability. Trickster is a killer I think falls into this tier. His knives are still pretty inconsistent, I think, and it's mainly covered up by how you can spam them. He still feels quite literally hit and miss though, and particularly his map dependence, and overall his lack of ability to really apply much pressure is a big downside for him. Still pretty balanced, I would say. Wraith is on the weaker end of killers, and so I think he lands himself in the pretty balanced tier. He's got a bit more going for him, I think, and it's mainly due to his speed he gets from Cloak, and also the stealth aspect he gets from it too. It just gives him that extra little kick over some of the other killers, who are purely just strong chase but nothing else. Nemesis, I think he can never really be considered that balanced, as his RNG zombies are a big factor in causing random occurrences that alter the trajectory of games. Nemesis to me is one of the least consistent killers to both use and face. However, his actual power is pretty fair, I think. The tentacle and infection system are solid when it comes to balance, skill, and counterplay. Ghostface is another killer similar to Nemesis, who I'm on saying is too balanced, because of the inconsistency his power has. Shroud reveals are still very iffy, and can feel unfair for both sides. By and large though, Ghostface after his changes is pretty balanced. Dredge is fine, I guess. That's like my full opinion on the gameplay of the character. I just find it very boring, but the balance is fine. It's okay. Not perfect, somewhat RNG dependent with lockers, and things like map brightness even, but overall, fine. And it's still on the stronger end of killers, I think, with enough counterplay. I'd rather talk about its lore, to be honest. Artist is one of the stronger killers in the game, but I think she's balanced overall. She can be very strong on loops, but I think the skill required and time to learn her, and the fact that her power is clearly signalled and time is given to counter her, she's pretty fair. A little too map dependent, I think, but by and large, I find her quite fair. Okay, onto balanced as all things should be tier. Deathslinger has his issues, but overall he is still very balanced. His add-ons are pretty awful, and it sucks that they nerfed his ADS still, but he's still up there in terms of strength, and perfectly counterable for survivors too. There are clear indications of power usage, and ways teams can work together to beat him. His chase potential is very high though. Huntress I would say is balanced. I think similar to Slinger, she has her downsides, mainly in the form of hitboxes being weird, although that's gotten a lot better over the years. Her add-ons are really solid and fair, and her simple power lets her be strong, but also perfectly counterable for the survivor side. Facing her feels fair. Myers is a super weird one for here maybe, but I think he's actually very balanced for what he is. He's very unique as a killer due to how his power works, and the way his add-ons can significantly change how you play him. But I think he's fair, and I think he's balanced. Maps are the main factor to dispute this, but the power itself and gameplay overall I think is balanced. Weird, weak, and different, but fair. Doctor is another killer I would consider balanced. His power is clearly signalled in every way, and I think the way shocks move and interact with survivors is just very fair. Madness is a solid mechanic, and can be managed by survivors, but also a great tool for Doctor. He's balanced, I think. Legion is another killer I actually think is really balanced. Annoying, but balanced. The way they can injure a full team quickly is powerful, but it's also the main thing they have, before their power largely becomes a chase-focused one. They are the closest to a simple M1 killer, who still manages to be balanced. Wesker I think is really balanced actually. He's one of the newer additions to the game, so it's surprising he's in such a good state, but I think his power, although strong, is perfectly counterable and fair. yeah, I am content with him, personally. Okay, onto the extremely balanced tier. Executioner is maybe a bit of a curveball pick for this high up the list, but I actually think he's very balanced. The complicated nature of his kit is evened out by how strong it can be when used well. It also has plenty of ways to counter. His ranged attack, although strong, is clearly signalled, and moves at a pace which is avoidable. Overall, Pyramid Head I think is up there for balance. Oni and Plague I want to somewhat group together for balance, as I think they both do the same thing very well, which leads to their balance. They both have a similar slow start that requires pressure and build up before they can unleash a large amount of power. Both of these characters require planning and strategy, and the outcome you get from them is earned 99% of the time. And getting beaten by these killers, you can pretty much always point out a mistake you made, as Survivor, as their powers work off of how much you feed them things essentially, and manage their powers, if that makes sense. Demogorgon I still think is maybe the most balanced killer in the game. It's partly down to how its main ability is basically just an exaggerated version of basic attacks. It helps to create instant balance, I think. The portal system is strong but fair, and can be countered. The shreds are again strong, but are clearly signalled and counterable too. Demo has pretty much always been a character I've looked to when I think of balance. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. As always, I do hope you enjoyed, and be sure to drop your own thoughts down below. Thanks, and okay, bye!